Our special guest this morning, because we're a bit worried about what's going on with our restaurant industry at the moment, not only for those who run it, but also for those who work in it. And this is a really big story, of course, off the back of George Calombaris. But you can go back in time to 7-Eleven, you can go to Woolworths, you can go to all sorts of industries. We've seen Heston Blumenthal's dinner fall over. We've seen celebrity chefs come in, from Jamie Oliver to Gordon Ramsay. What is going on and how do we sort it out? Now, I'm just going to give you the player profile on the bloke we're going to speak to, Chris Lucas, okay? Grew up in Geelong. His father, Con, actually worked as a chef, executive chef at the Southern Cross Hotel. So he is steeped in the tradition of hospitality and the restaurant industry. Became a publican, his father. And in the meantime, Chris, who was pretty smart, went to Monash University, did a pharmacy degree, ended up in global IT, came back, and then started his businesses. 1 Fitzroy Street. He kicked the Botanical Hotel down there in Domain Road into gear, turned it into one of the best places in the city. He is now the owner of Chin Chin, Hawker Hall, Kong, Baby, Kashume. Batard is coming to Burke Street, one of the biggest French restaurants we've ever seen in this town, and 80 Collins Street is about to open up. He will employ 300 to 500 extra young people in the next 12 months. He's ideal to talk about what's going on. First question to you, is George guilty, or is he just being the whipping boy for everybody, or a combination of both?
Oh, he's clearly been an scapegoat for what is a very, very significant issue right across the economy. And sadly, I think it's been politicised well beyond what's reasonable. And I'm hoping, and I'm sure George and all his employees who are now unemployed will see this as a watershed moment, because what has happened to George cannot be extended beyond beyond basically one restaurant. If we see this spread throughout our industry and spread throughout the economy, there is literally going to be tens of thousands of people unemployed, and no one wants that.
It's happened in San Francisco in the restaurant industry. We're going to take a break. When we come back, Chris, I want you to tell me how we sort this out, because I'm sick of the headlines as well. We're sick of people being left in the street. We saw interviews last night on the news, people saying that who work for George, that he's a great guy. We see the letters in the papers today saying almost hanging him at dawn. What do we need to do to make sure this doesn't happen again? Chris Lucas will give us the solution next on Triple M's Hot Breakfast. We want to get into this conversation because it's a big one. And I just want to point out here, Das, this is not about one particular chef or a restaurant organisation. This is going to spread right through employment in this country, and the ramifications to industries like Coles and Woolworths and pubs and clubs and restaurants. And the whole employment situation is coming to a head on this situation, where now you've got the biggest directors in the country also starting to quiver. And what happens there, of course, is insurances will go up. And the bottom line is your food at the supermarket will end up going up as well, and no one will have a job. It's not scaremongering. It is now time for action, and you've got some questions to Chris Lucas.
He's one of the most important figures in the restaurant business in Australia, and people are nervous to speak up about this topic, Chris, because it's very sensitive about wages. What is the solution? How do we take this forward and get our industry back on track?
Well, a couple of things, Das. Like, for instance, I can tell you what not is the solution. A lynch mob mentality, trying to drive businesses out of business, is not the solution. Politicising the entire premise of how we pay and how we economically run our businesses and employ young people is not the solution. Running away from it is not the solution. So George is an example of what not to do. He put himself in, tried to rectify, paid everyone back, yet certain elements of the union movement and the media decided that wasn't enough. So they created a media storm, which was fueled by social media, and what have we achieved at the end of it? 500 kids unemployed, and now potentially a domino effect. And I fear, not just for our industry, because I feel our industry is a bit like the canary in the coal mine here, right? Because our award is so complex and has had virtually no reform over the decades, we're stuck with an inefficient system that is hurting the employees. The people being hurt here are kids in the street. Your kids, my kids, kids that want to go work at McDonald's. How many of us worked our way through university working in a pub or a club or in a bar somewhere? Yep. So as parents, but as individuals, we've got to understand that this is at the very core of what our community and what our country is about. Because if we can't find a way to employ people, in particular young people, effectively and efficiently so that all parties win here, then we have got a real problem. And I can tell you right now, this is a national-wide problem. It's just that George has borne the brunt of what has been, quite frankly, a politicised campaign, and we've got to find a way forward.
So now we've got a major events industry here in Victoria, so that spreads out even further.
Yeah, so what do we do, Chris? What's your idea?
This is what I think we should have done. And I implore, hopefully today, and I'm sure this is one of the great rating shows in Australia, hopefully the Prime Minister is listening, Scott Morrison. Hopefully Josh Frydenberg is listening. Hopefully the Leader of the Opposition is listening, and hopefully some of our friends in the union movement are listening, because we have got to come together.
A summit?
I think if you go back 30 years ago, Bob Hawke's genius idea of bringing all the warring parties together, taking the political stoush and heat out of it, and talking some sense. We have got to find a way forward. And I don't have all the answers, but I can tell you that everyone's stuck in their camp, throwing stones at each other and using the media as a channel to do it is not the solution.
It seems to me that the award is just too complicated. In a 24/7 industry, it just seems to be too complicated at the moment.
Absolutely.
Is that the problem?
Yeah, look, that's the core essence of the problem. And I'm not just talking about the restaurant industry. The restaurant industry's act is absolutely at the extreme end in terms of complexity and inefficiency. And so it doesn't allow our businesses to be able to work effectively. And the core result is, this is what the core result's going to be. Less restaurants, less cafes. By the way, if you just step out in this little street here, which is a small little village, we are the fabric of small communities. We're not big business. We're small businesses. We make cups of coffee in the morning. We serve pieces of cake. We're not mega national enterprises.
Yeah.
But let me tell you, the national big enterprises are hurting as well. I mean, have a look at what happened at Woolworths. And Woolworths is just the tip of the iceberg. So we must accept as a community, as a country, our politicians and our leaders, our unionists and parents and voters must understand that unless we find a way forward, it cuts at the very fabric of what this economy is all about. If we can't employ people efficiently and properly and pay them in a way that is appropriate, that balances the needs of the business as well as the employee, then we are in big trouble. And we are in big trouble today, Eddie.
Now, a lot of this has come about because both parties, ALP and Liberal, get on the extremes of each other.
Correct.
So what was the old one that the Libs had at one stage? I've forgotten what it was, where they all ran backwards when they could basically sack anyone they liked.
Well, so I think you're talking about work choices.
Work choice.
So
that was one extreme.
Absolutely.
And then you've got then there's always the pendulum slings the other way.
Correct.
And traditionally, as we always talk about on this show, you need to find yourself in the middle somewhere.
Correct.
What is that middle?
Well, the middle is we need leadership. And the middle is always the only way to a solution. And right now we are a polarised community. Everyone is battened down into their corner. And it's not just this particular issue. I mean, that's an even broader issue about how we're dealing with our economy worldwide. But if you look at what this is all about, it's about people not getting together, working out what the real problem is, and finding a solution.
You travel the world. Is there a model that we should be looking at internationally that works? Because it's, as I said, it's falling over in San Francisco.
Look, we had the model right here 30 years ago when Bob Hawke sat down, dragged everyone into Canberra and said, enough of this combative, fractured, confrontational way. Because at the end of the day, if you don't get a wages accord, and if the wages accord doesn't balance with the needs of business, then guess what? We're all in big trouble. And we've got to, and this is what I think. If Scott Morrison is listening, if Josh Frydenberg is listening,
they're listening.
Let's pull everyone together. Let's cut the crap. Let's get the politics out of it. Let's get all the interested bodies, the unions, both sides of politics, and business and other community leaders, because it affects social enterprise. It affects people who are trying to help the lower end of our community, because they're the ones that are going to get hurt, right? At the end of the day, sure, what happened to George is absolutely sad, but there's 500 kids today, Eddie, who are unemployed, and by the way, those kids have got wives, girlfriends, children, mortgages to pay, so there's 1,500 to 2,000 people affected.